Welcome to our Explainer. Today, we're diving into a piece of work that literally shook the academic world and pretty much birthed the entire field of evolutionary psychology as we know it. We're going back to 1979. Donald Symons, an anthropologist at UC Santa Barbara, published this incredibly debated book called The Evolution of Human Sexuality. You have to understand, before this book, the study of our sexual feelings and fantasies, that was strictly the turf of sociologists and anthropologists. Evolutionary theory was completely off limits. But Symons, he changed the whole game by applying the cold, hard logic of evolution to our most intimate, private desires. Okay, let's dive into this because this question right here is the central puzzle of Symons' entire book. Why do men and women generally seem to have such different attitudes towards sexual variety, commitment, and arousal? Symons argued that to really answer this, we can't just look at modern culture. We actually have to look deep into our evolutionary past. So today, we're going to neutrally and objectively explore both the foundational theories Symons put forward, as well as the fierce, politically charged criticisms that immediately followed. To justify tackling a topic that's so subjective, so intangible, and frankly, often taboo, Symons used this great parable of a drunk guy looking for his lost keys. Think about it. The drunk searches under the street lamp just because the light is good, right? But his keys are actually lost way out there in the darkness. Symons argued that behavioral science had basically been doing the exact same thing, staying in the safe, well-lit areas of outward human behavior. He believed that to find the actual truth about human sexuality, we had to venture into the dark. We had to dig into the messy, complex world of internal fantasies, emotions, and unconscious motivations. So, here is our roadmap for today. Number 1, searching in the dark. 2, the biology of reproduction. 3, 2 distinct sexual natures. 4, controversies, artifacts, and critics. And finally, a highly debated legacy. Starting off with Section 1, Searching in the Dark, the 1979 intellectual landscape. We really need to place ourselves in the mindset of 1979. At that time, taking evolutionary concepts, which had totally revolutionized how we understand the rest of the animal kingdom, and applying them to human sexual feelings was just incredibly controversial. It was basically forbidden territory. Symons actually opens chapter 6 with a quote from Mark Twain, noting that many men are, quote, goats when it comes to adultery. And Symons boldly uses this idea to separate our outward social behavior from our underlying genetic desires. See, humans live in complex societies with marriage rules and rigid social constraints, so our actions are heavily regulated. But Symons argued that our internal desires, the stuff we actually fantasize about, are much closer to our raw genes than our outward behaviors are. Moving on to Section 2, the biologic of reproduction, the evolutionary foundations of desire. To understand our underlying psychology, Symons introduces this concept he calls biologic. Basically, this is the deep, unconscious motivational structure that guides our behavior in ways that, ancestrally speaking, promoted reproductive success. And the absolute core of this biologic relies on something called parental investment. Now, this is just a stark biological reality. In human reproduction, the investment required from males versus females is massively asymmetric. A human female faces a huge, non-negotiable physical investment. 9 months of pregnancy, physical risk, lactation, years of childcare. But a male's biological minimum investment, strictly speaking, it can be as little as the act of mating itself. We're literally talking a matter of minutes. And this massive asymmetry brilliantly illustrates the consequences for our evolution. Because women invest so much physical time and energy, their reproductive capacity is actually the limiting resource here. A woman can only have a limited number of children in her lifetime, regardless of how many partners she might have. Therefore, her biological strategy is high selectivity. She is driven to choose mates with the best genetic quality, resources, and a willingness to commit. A male, on the other hand, can theoretically father an immense number of children. His limiting factor is simply access to females. So this forces males into fierce competition with one another, driving a reproductive strategy that inherently values having multiple partners. Which brings us to Section 3, 2 distinct sexual natures, variety versus selectivity. Because of this massive reproductive imbalance, we arrive at Symons' central and honestly highly polarizing thesis. He argued that there's a distinct male human nature, a distinct female human nature, and that these two natures are extraordinarily different. Just look at the direct contrast here. The evolved male archetype is driven by a deep desire for sexual variety, responds heavily to visual stimuli, and leans toward novelty and risk-taking. The evolved female archetype is driven by selectivity, prioritizing mate quality, resources, and long-term commitment. Now, it is absolutely crucial to remember that Symons is talking about internal, biologic, and deep-seated desire. He is not saying modern society always allows us to act this way. He's saying these are the ancient impulses echoing in our modern minds. Honestly, it's the exact same invisible force that might help explain how people behave on dating apps today. To prove just how stark this difference in arousal really is, Symons analyzed the pornography industry, which he cleverly called pornotopia. He pointed out that this vast global market is almost exclusively consumed by males. To Symons, pornotopia reflects unfiltered, raw male desire. It's totally focused on visual stimuli, sheer physical gratification, and an endless stream of willing partners, completely devoid of any encumbering relationships. The fact that there is virtually no equivalent female market for this specific type of purely visual, detached material, Symons argued that proves male and female sexual triggers are just fundamentally wired differently. Another fascinating piece of this puzzle is concealed ovulation. Unlike most mammals, human females don't broadcast physical signs when they are fertile. So why keep it a secret? Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, Symons argued this was an incredibly powerful tool. By keeping males guessing about exactly when conception could occur, females essentially forced males to stick around. They had to provide ongoing investment and protection just to ensure their paternity. It's a brilliant biological strategy. That takes us to Section 4. Controversies, artifacts, and critics, the fierce backlash. As you can probably guess, reducing our most intimate romantic relationships to the cold calculus of evolutionary biology did not sit well with everyone. Critics came out swinging, heavily accusing Symons of sexism, genetic determinism, and basically trying to justify the patriarchal status quo. This backlash really caught fire around a few specific highly charged topics where Symons applied his biologic. We're talking about the biological purpose of the female orgasm, evolutionary explanations for male sexual coercion, and the behavioral patterns of male homosexuality. So let's objectively walk through how he approached these and how his critics fired back. Let's start with the hugely contentious debate over the female orgasm. Symons controversially argued that the female orgasm is not an evolutionary adaptation at all. His logic was that since a female orgasm isn't strictly necessary for conception to happen, it wasn't selected for directly by evolution. Instead, he claimed it's an artifact. It's just a byproduct of the fact that males and females share early developmental blueprints in the womb. Kind of like how men have nipples that serve no reproductive function, Symons said females have the capacity for orgasm simply because males absolutely need it to reproduce. Well, critics fiercely rejected this. They presented strong counter-evidence arguing that the female orgasm absolutely serves vital adaptive functions, like promoting essential pair bonding between partners and even facilitating sperm retention. Now we have to navigate the absolute darkest and most explosive controversy in the book, the topic of sexual coercion and rape. Symons argued that rape can be explained in evolutionary terms as a horrific byproduct of the evolved male desire for sexual variety combined with a natural male tendency to use aggression. Symons and his defenders explicitly stated, and this is a crucial distinction, that explaining a behavior is not justifying it. Understanding the evolutionary roots of a behavior does not, in any way, excuse it ethically or legally. However, critics were completely outraged. They argued this was dangerous biological determinism that basically naturalized and excused male violence against women. It sparked a massive, highly sensitive debate that honestly still rages in academia today. Symons also used male homosexuality as a behavioral test case for his theories, which was quite groundbreaking at the time. He pointed to data suggesting that, on average, homosexual men tend to have significantly more sexual partners and engage in more casual sex than both heterosexual men and homosexual women. Symons argued that if you want to see what male sexual psychology looks like when it's completely unconstrained by the high selectivity of female partners, you look at gay men. To him, this data proved that the drive for immense sexual variety is an innate biological male trait, not just some cultural construct imposed by society. And finally, Section 5, a highly debated legacy, the birth of evolutionary psychology. Whether scholars completely agreed with Symons' conclusions or vehemently despised them, the publication of this text permanently altered the landscape of behavioral science. 1979 was literally just the beginning. His book acts as the true bedrock for what exploded into the field of evolutionary psychology throughout the 1980s and 90s. His evolutionary frameworks directly influenced later, equally controversial works like Thornhill and Palmer's writings on coercion in the year 2000. Decades later, this exact text is still being dissected in university classrooms around the world. It acts as the ultimate catalyst for continuing debates about the true nature of human desire. So we return to the foundational quote of the entire book. Symons forced academia, and really society at large, to confront a deeply uncomfortable possibility. He suggested that our intimate desires, our fantasies, and even our modern relationship conflicts aren't simply the result of how we were raised or the media we consume. He proposed that they are deeply, perhaps immutably, rooted in our biology, shaped by the harsh, competitive realities of prehistoric survival. Which leaves us with this final, provocative question to reflect on. As you navigate love, romance, and attraction in the modern world, are you truly making free, independent choices? Or are our most intimate desires merely the echoes of a million-year-old evolutionary game? It's a fascinating, sometimes unsettling tension between our ancestral past and our modern identities. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the world around you.